Welcome to The Silent Script, the podcast where we explore the stories that hide in plain sight. The experiences that seem ordinary on the surface, but reveal something far more complicated when viewed through a different lens. Today, we're examining a journey, a quiet, aching kind of journey about someone who kept reaching for love and kept finding the door closed. We're calling them the Silent Scripter.
And I want people to really sit with that name for a second, the Silent Scripter, because this is someone who had words, real clear words. They just couldn't seem to get anyone to hear them.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this story so relatable. It's not a dramatic heartbreak tale, it's quieter than that. It's the slow accumulation of moments where you try to connect and something always gets in the way.
Let's start at the beginning, because this wasn't one bad experience. This was a pattern, right? Relationship after relationship, and each time, emotional intimacy just never arrived.
Right? Think about what that does to a person over time. You put yourself out there, you try to be vulnerable, you try to show up fully, and the connection you're hoping for just doesn't materialize. Not because anything dramatic happened, it just didn't happen. And sometimes there was someone else in the picture, a third party that changed the dynamic before things even had a chance to grow.
That third-party situation is something I think a lot of people have experienced and don't talk about. It's not even necessarily betrayal. Sometimes it's just you arrived a little too late or someone else was already there in a way you couldn't compete with.
And the silent scripters started to internalize that. At some point, the story they were telling themselves shifted from the timing was bad to love is just not in my cards. That's a significant shift. That's not a momentary disappointment. That's a conclusion.
A conclusion that protects you but also slowly closes you off.
Exactly.
So then something changed. Someone came along who actually made an impact. Tell me about that shift.
This is where the story gets interesting and a little heartbreaking. Because here finally is someone who moves the needle. Someone the silent scripter genuinely feels something for, but even here, the gap between what each person wanted and what was actually being given or understood was enormous.
What does that look like in practice, that gap?
It looks like someone expressing a need or a feeling being open, being honest about what they want, and instead of that being received, the other person withdraws, closes off. Like the vulnerability itself triggers a kind of alarm.
Emotional unavailability showing up as a defense mechanism.
Yes. And what that creates between two people is this thick air of awkwardness. Nobody is being cruel. Nobody is intentionally hurting anyone. But the space between them becomes uncomfortable because the honest expression of emotion keeps landing wrong.
And for the silent scripter, that awkwardness had a specific cost.
A deep one. They started to feel like their emotions were being criticized, invalidated, like the act of feeling something and saying so was somehow the problem. And when you feel that enough times, you start to second guess your own emotional reality.
Here's what I find so complicated about this particular dynamic though, because these two people actually had a lot in common, similar values, and as friends, just as people in each other's lives, they were kind to each other, genuinely kind.
That's what made it so confusing. There was real warmth there, genuine warmth, the kind of energy that feels magnetic and safe at the same time. And that kindness is what made the silent scripter feel safe enough to have feelings in the first place.
But the kindness and the emotional unavailability were both real at the same time. And I think that's actually one of the hardest combinations to navigate because there's nothing obviously wrong. Nobody's being terrible. It's not a toxic situation. It's just misaligned.
And misalignment with someone you genuinely care about, who genuinely cares about you, that can be more disorienting than outright rejection. Because you can't point to the thing that's wrong. It just quietly doesn't fit.
And this is where the silent scripter's internal journey gets really honest, because they didn't just sit in the feelings, they started to interrogate them. They asked themselves, are these feelings real, or is this limerence?
For listeners who may not be familiar, limerence is that intense, sometimes obsessive state of infatuation. It's characterized by intrusive thoughts, idealization of the other person, a desperate need for reciprocation. It feels like love, but it's more like a craving. The person becomes an object of longing rather than someone you truly know.
And distinguishing between limerence and genuine feeling is hard, really hard, because from the inside, they can feel identical.
They can. So the silent scripter did something brave. They actually tested it. They didn't just sit with the uncertainty. They went out and built other connections, other relationships, tried to see if the feeling could be replicated somewhere else.
And
It wasn't the same. Nothing reached that level, which told them something. but still didn't fully answer the question of whether what they felt was real or just an attachment formed from need and proximity and all those years of not finding it elsewhere.
So the question stayed open. They kept carrying it.
Until a friend asked the right question at the right time.
This is my favourite part of the story, because sometimes clarity doesn't come from months of therapy or journaling or sitting in silence. Sometimes it comes from one simple question from someone who cares about you.
The friend asked, "Do you like them as a person, or do you like them because of their beauty?"
Simple, direct, and somehow exactly what needed to be asked.
And the silent scripter didn't hesitate. They said, "Because of who they are as a person." The beauty was appreciated, yes, but that wasn't the thing. It was the substance of who this person was that mattered.
And the friend just as simply said, well, if the feelings aren't mutual, a decision needs to be made.
No drama, no lecture, just a clear, honest mirror held up at exactly the right moment.
That's what real friendship does sometimes. It doesn't fix anything, but it gives you the frame you needed to finally see clearly.
But that clarity didn't come without a cost. After that conversation, the silent scripter entered a period of deep questioning. And it wasn't just about their own feelings anymore. It became about reality on both ends.
What do you mean by both ends?
They started looking at the whole thing honestly. Their feelings, yes, but also the dynamic itself. What was real between them and what they'd been filling in with hope. Whether the warmth and kindness they'd experienced was genuine care, or whether it was just the way this person moved through the world with everyone. And whether holding on was worth what it was costing them.
That's an act of courage, honestly, because it's easier to stay in the comfortable confusion than to look at something clearly and admit what you see.
It is, and what the silent scripter ultimately decided was, I am not going to complicate this further. I'm not going to force a conversation that wasn't wanted or hold on to something that was hurting more than it was helping. The decision was to turn inward.
Which is such an underrated kind of resolution. We tend to think of love stories as needing a big ending, a confession, a fight, a moment of closure, but sometimes the most important thing you can do is just choose yourself and walk toward clarity.
Exactly. The silent scripter chose to focus on themselves, on what they truly want in life, not what they've been settling for, not what they'd convinced themselves to want, but the actual truth of it. What kind of connection do I deserve? What kind of intimacy have I been missing? And what does it mean to build a life around those things rather than hoping someone else will fill the space?
And I think there's something in this story about the way emotional invalidation compounds, because every time the silent scripter expressed something real and it landed wrong, either through withdrawal, awkwardness, or just not being received, it added to this internal ledger of maybe I'm too much, maybe my feelings are wrong, maybe I should want less. And choosing yourself means clearing that ledger.
Saying, my emotions are not the problem. My capacity to feel deeply is not a flaw. I just haven't found the space yet where that's honored.
And that is a different story than love is not in my cards. That's a story of I'm still here. I haven't given up on the thing. I've just chosen to stop waiting for it in places where it wasn't coming.
That's the story of the silent scripter. And I think what stays with me is how many people are living some version of this right now, quietly, writing their own silent scripts, feeling things they can't seem to get out in a way that's received, wondering if the problem is them.
It's not. The problem is never feeling. The problem is finding the right space for that feeling to live. If this story resonated with you, if you recognize yourself in any part of the silent scripter's journey, we'd love to hear from you, because that's the whole point of this show. These stories don't live in silence. They live here, where we can look at them together. Thank you for listening to The Silent Script. Until next time, keep reading the stories hiding in plain sight.
Take care of yourselves.